morning. It is Thursday, the 31st of December. I'm Yael Lavie, and this New Year's Eve, we're going to take a special look at what made your headlines on our show in 2015. So coming up later today, 2015 coming to an end, and in Israel, it was undisputedly the year of one man, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and a closer look at how he won Israel again. Who was the most influential person of the year? Many contenders, but only one rose to the top. We're going to share our pick with you. And later on the show, a closer look into the future to see what 2016 may have in store for you, ourselves, and everybody else. Good morning, I'm Yael Lavie, and we begin the last day of 2015 taking a closer look at the man of the year in Israel, where we are sitting. A divisive figure around the world, but the undisputed king, as they sometimes call him, Bibi, or Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in his own country, defined the year that was in Israel. The seemingly irreplaceable premier won another election in April this year and managed to form a very narrow, but what so far seems like a stable right-wing government. Winning the election came as a surprise. But once in power, Netanyahu has consolidated much of the government powers, critics will say, holding no less than 5 ministerial files. Throughout the year, Netanyahu also took the country for a tumultuous diplomatic ride, antagonizing world leaders and some would say courting a religious war. But for now, Netanyahu's Israel finds itself at once reviled for its policies relating to the Palestinians and its internal Arab minority, admired for its innovation and technological know-how, and possibly, some would argue, in the worst ever phase of its relationship with the biggest benefactor, the U.S. So what does 2016 hold for Netanyahu and his Israel? Joining me in studio to figure that one out is I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Good morning. Good morning. And Happy New Year in a second. Of course, with us, Ami Kaufman, I-24 News contributor. Good morning. Good morning. Let's first, though, break this down. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's man of the year, as far as we're concerned. In Tal Shalev's report, let's take a look.
2015 was the year Netanyahu went to war. Not a military one, but on the political and diplomatic battlefield. He fought on several fronts, winning one battle and losing another. The outcome of the third still hangs in the balance. The year began with a stormy election campaign. Netanyahu's path to his fourth term seemed quite uncertain, as a joint alliance between Labour chairman Isaac Herzog and Hatnuah chairwoman Tzipi Livni appeared to pose a real threat to his rule. At the end of the last week before the elections, all polls indicated he was way behind the new Zionist Union.
The right-wing rule is in jeopardy. Arab voters are heading to the polling stations in droves.
In a remarkable last-minute pitch, Netanyahu shuffled the cards. His controversial statement about the Arab voters might have caused him irreversible damage in the world, but it certainly helped him win the re-election, as right-wing voters flocked back to his pocket. On March 17, when results came out, Netanyahu proved he was the one and only star. In a sharp contrast to his internal victory, in his key international battle, Netanyahu was much less successful. For years, the Israeli premier has been warning about the dangers of a nuclear Iran. As the world and Iran engaged in intensive negotiations, Netanyahu did everything he could to try and abort the emerging agreement.
This is a bad deal. It's a very bad deal.
The battle began in March when Netanyahu addressed a joint session of the U.S. Congress, which was set up without the knowledge of the White House. After the deal was signed in July, he continued the head-to-head battle with the administration, leading a powerful public opinion struggle aimed at blocking congressional approval of the deal. The direct confrontation was perceived as a Republican maneuver against the president, and the Democrats stuck to their home base. Netanyahu will never acknowledge it, but this time, the trophy goes to Obama. As the Iran deal battle concluded, another front emerged. A wave of Palestinian terror has swept the West Bank and Jerusalem, with car rammings, stabbings, and other acts of violence occurring on a near-daily basis. Netanyahu has blamed Palestinian incitement for the rise in terror, but with no diplomatic process on the horizon, he has problems rallying the support of the international community. Despite adopting harsh measures intended to deter and punish the Palestinian assailants, Netanyahu is yet to present an adequate answer to the uptick. placing his Mr. Security image in quite a vulnerable spot. Can he win the war on terror? 2016 will have the answer.
And wondering what the answer will be in 2016, Tal Shalev with us in studio. Netanyahu, I think it's undisputed that in Israel this was definitely his year. I want you to take us back a little bit, because at the beginning of the, around April, when the elections were on the way, really everybody seemed convinced, including internationally, that he most likely will not win these elections. It was kind of a rise in the last minute.
Well, I think there was a perception, a wrong perception, that was mostly designed by the media and by opinion polls. By the way, this was a very bad year for pollsters, not only here in Israel, but also in the United Kingdom, where they also failed to predict the election results. And I think there was a lot of wishful thinking here in the Israeli left, who still dominates mainstream media in Israel and abroad. Of course, in the White House and in Europe, people are waiting for a much more moderate leader. But at the end of the day, Netanyahu started this election with no viable alternative in sight, and there was an illusion that Herzog and Livni created a viable alternative, but at the end of the day, they did not serve that. And Netanyahu is a master of public opinion. And yes, at the last minute, he succeeded to totally turn over the picture, and he definitely granted himself a landslide victory, one that justifies his nickname as a magician, or BB King, as you mentioned earlier.
The BB King, so to speak. And there were also specific moments throughout this tumultuous year, and for that, cue in Ami Kaufman, our resident pressman, to help us just move through the year, because it wasn't just in Israel, it was worldwide that he made headlines, the man.
Definitely worldwide.
Netanyahu.
I mean,
Yes.
so much to choose from, so many headlines. We're only going to show you three. One of my favorites, though, when Netanyahu was speaking at the UN this year, early October, and he gave the UN members a 45-second stare, admonishing them for being silent. Actually, his words were, "Iran's leaders promised to destroy my country, murder my people, and the response from this body, the response from nearly every one of the governments represented here, has been absolutely nothing, utter silence, deafening silence." And then he just stared at everybody for 45 seconds. It was one of the most bizarre television moments I think I have ever seen in my life. I don't know what happens to Bibi Netanyahu when he gets on the UN podium. He thinks that he is some kind of kindergarten teacher, either bringing some kind of artifacts to draw on them, or look at other people, thinking that world leaders are children and just looking at them in silence. It's just...
yes.
I'd like to defer, just for the sake of the argument, that he is a master of rhetoric skills, and the fact that he gave this speech of silence, of course, drew a lot of criticism and cynicism, but at the end of the day, he got the headlines. He got the headlines. He gets the headlines time and again, and this is what makes him the figure he is.
If I may defer, if you want to get headlines by looking like a fool, be my guest. Netanyahu, another one from the New York Times, Netanyahu's denounced for saying Palestinians inspired the Holocaust. This is a great one.
Yes.
He managed to, he said that the Palestinian Mufti in the 1940s is responsible for giving Hitler the idea to annihilate European Jewry. He said that Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews, and when he talked to the Mufti about it, he convinced him to burn the Jews and not expel them. Every historian came out against this. Every politician came out against this. What's interesting also is the timing. It was a day before a visit to Germany.
I think a day before a visit to Germany, but I think that it's safe to say, and I'll be, I'll just put it in this somewhat even objective way. I never thought I would live to see the day where the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, feels the need to come out publicly, internationally, and assume responsibility for the Holocaust.
Yes.
And say, no, it was us who did it.
It was us, yeah. We are
then
committed.
Again, if I can play the devil's advocate again, this did, at the first 24 hours were outrageous, it was scandalous, but after 24 hours, a really serious debate emerged in Israeli media, in the U.S. media, in public opinion about the Palestinian role in the Holocaust and the Mufti's involvement and connection to the Nazis, and that made many people believe that this was actually intentional. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just Netanyahu failing in his words. This was actually something intentional, intended on raising the issue and raising the topic into the public opinion.
Into the public opinion. And the thing is, I think the one point that we've made clear is that Netanyahu is a phoenix that rises from the ashes. That's my, explanation. Is a rhetorical master, but definitely the man who dominated the play in this country. And it is time, but every story has two sides. And in order to get the perspective of the often silent minority, let's go live first to Labor, to Labor member and former commander of the IDF's elite Sayeret Matkal unit, Omer Bar-Lev, who's joining us live right now. I want to very much thank you for being with us this morning, and Happy New Year to you. I'm asking you a question that I wanted to ask everybody from the left camp, so to speak.
Good morning.
Good morning. Over the course of the 2015, what do you feel, because you're part of the Zionist camp, and you're part of the people of the group or the party that lost the elections to Benjamin Netanyahu this year, where has the left camp gone wrong, in your mind, over the course of 2015?
First of all, it's always better to win than to lose. Our disappointment is clear. Where was the mistake? I don't know if it's much of a mistake. What happened in the last 3 or 4 days? Netanyahu took off all ways of behavior, if I may say so, and tried and unfortunately succeeded to frighten a certain number of Israeli citizens, and this what gave him, against all assumptions, gave him the additional 5 or 6 seats in the Knesset. And so it's more about him, and I think less about us.
But that said, then, if 6 elections and no man rises, and it seems to be that, a narrative in Israel that Benjamin Netanyahu is the only man to be prime minister, is there a man on the side of the left that you think can rise? And are there concerns? What is the so to speak, contra Bibi camp planning for the upcoming year?
First of all, I agree with you that this is the narrative in Israel, and all narratives, some of them continue and exist, and some of them collapse. I believe that at a certain stage, not too far away, this narrative will collapse. At least, I'm involving beliefs and what I'm expecting that will happen. Or what I want that will happen, and if I look at the last elections and the elections before that, basically the main 2 blocks stayed the same size each blocks. Some say even that the middle left block got a little bit bigger. The question was how was the division in these blocks, and as I said before, in the last 4 or 5 days, Netanyahu succeeded to take actually 4 mandates from the Jewish home and shift them to the Likud. And the Jewish home went down with 4 mandates, and he went up with 4 mandates, and this made the whole picture. So is this going to be next time? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Surely I hope that it won't happen, but of course it might happen.
Okay, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
I think it's not. What I said. What I wanted to add that I think it's less about who leads the Zionist camp. It's more about Netanyahu's behavior and the specific mood in the Israeli public at the last days before the elections. And this time, both of them worked very good for Netanyahu and not so good for us, to say the least.
To say the least. Yes, Tal Shalev. No, and I want to thank you, Mr. Bar-Lev, just for joining us this morning. My question to you, Tal Shalev, irrespective of the look back at the elections that we saw right now, and I think the other side will always try to break down what happened there, when we're looking at the strategy of Netanyahu for the upcoming year, because he has not given any kind of solution for the ongoing terror wave that Israel is going through. Relations with the U.S. have been deemed the worst they've ever been. What is the strategy for the next year?
Well, I would say that Netanyahu is a clear political creature, and when we want to understand his strategy, the main guideline is survival and maintaining his seat. So when you every time you want to understand what motivates Netanyahu, that is usually the motivation, trying to maintain and secure his reign. But that being said, while it was a very good year internally, it was a very bad year externally. And I do believe we're not only talking about the rift with the United States, we also have the U.S. giving up on the peace process. We have the EU settlement labeling. We have the diplomatic stalemate, which is already starting to take a price. So I do believe that that will be higher on Netanyahu's agenda this year. That being said, he does have some challenges to overcome. Beginning even today, there is a huge corruption scandal floating over his and his wife's head. She will be investigated. Today she will be investigated under caution at the Israeli police, and at least in the upcoming months, that will be his main battle, trying to take that investigation off the table.
Off the table. Tal Shalev, I want to thank you. We're going to move ahead and look at the man of the year as we continue. In their choosing of a person of the year, Time magazine described the criteria for 2015 as, for better or for worse, a person who has done the most to influence the events of the year. Time magazine chose German Chancellor Angela Merkel, the one leader in Europe who opened her country's doors almost unconditionally to thousands of migrants who flocked into Europe this year, and that was commendable. We at the morning edition of I-24 News, though, beg to differ. Our pick of the one person who has truly reshaped world events this year is Vladimir Putin. Now, whether you like him or not, the Russian president has been at odds with the United States over the Ukrainian conflict, while also joining the coalition of nations bombing ISIS in Syria. But the Russian president did much more than that. Shunned by world leaders and put under sanctions for Russia's role in the 2014 standoff in the Ukraine, Putin was still able to impose himself on this year's most pressing problems, change world borders, return to the diplomatic center stage over the Syrian conflict, as well as play a key role in the Iran deal formation. Above all, the Russian strongman, who seems to have revived Russia back into a world power to contend with, Cold War style, so to speak, has positioned himself as the frontman player in the war against ISIS. Let's take a look at Mandy Kogusowski's report about Vladimir Putin and break it down from there.
2015 was a year that saw many global leaders flinch and falter in the face of challenge. But one man did not stoop: Russian President Vladimir Putin. From the civil war in Syria to fighting the Islamic State, Russia's influence this year extended far beyond Eastern Europe, with the goal of restoring its former superpower glory. In late September, Russia launched its first airstrike in Syria, in the country's biggest Middle East intervention in decades. Putin stated that the goal is to help the Assad regime fight the Islamic State. The West has been slamming these raids, claiming that they hit mostly moderate, anti-Assad rebels. Experts are concerned the Syrian dictator has been regaining strength under the Russian blanket.
Instead of calling us, Turkey quickly ran to Brussels, yelling, "Alert! Somebody is harming us." Who harmed you? Have we attacked anybody? No. If somebody in the Turkish leadership decided to kiss Americans behind, I don't know if they did the right thing.
Since Turkey downed a Russian jet over the Syrian border in November, Putin has not spared his sharp tongue from his new arch-enemy, Turkish President Erdogan, accusing him of supporting IS and rejecting any possible future reconciliation. And moving closer to home, earlier this month, Putin admitted for the first time that the Russian military has been conducting operations in separatist-held East Ukraine. Russia's military involvement in the area also puts it on a collision course with NATO, reviving Cold War tensions. Blazing ahead while shaking off criticism, it appears that 2016 will also be a strong year for the Russian leader. While many others will remain satisfied with rhetoric, Putin will not stop at anything short of full action, thoroughly enjoying the ride from the driver's seat.
So we are joined in studio by Middle East Bureau Chief for Russia Today, Paula Slier. Good morning to you. Next to you, Ami Kaufman, still with us, of course. And with us also, Research Fellow at the INSS and Senior Lecturer at Tel Aviv University, Dr. Benedetta Birdie. Tal Shalev, we lock you in studio. Okay, Putin. I want to actually start with Ami because I think to me the one interesting thing, and Russia and Russia Today's bureau chief Pulsley, I'm going to put you on the spot. Well, let's start with the headline, actually, Ami.
I have a few.
I want to start with the first one because I think
is
the main interesting thing is what we remember most of 2015, and it's the recent spat.
It's the recent spat between Turkey and Russia after Turkey shot down a Russian airplane allegedly over Turkish airspace. I don't know if we know yet. Paul, do we know yet if it was in Syrian airspace or Turkish airspace? Has there been?
So there's no.
Depends. It's still the jury is still out, right?
And anyway, probably will be a year from now as well.
Exactly. So there was a big ego battle between two people with a lot of egos, of course, Vladimir Putin and Tayyip Erdogan. And one of the things that Putin said at the Paris Climate Summit was that Russia has proof that Turkey is buying oil from ISIS. And this made things even worse. He says, at the moment, we have received additional information confirming that oil from the deposits controlled by Islamic State militants enters Turkish territory on industrial scale. Erdogan immediately denied this, but there has been, I think, some other mainstream media saying there is proof that actually there is oil going into Turkey from ISIS. So
and many have claimed that. But when we're looking, I think one of the defining things of Vladimir Putin this year is positioning himself as the leader of the war against ISIS. The strategy of Russia, the strategy of Putin over Syria to beat ISIS there. How is that going?
I think it's remarkable. I mean, I think if exactly what you say, if you look at Putin, let's say, or Russia, a few months ago, it was a pariah on the international stage. And now no one would talk about the future of Syria without mentioning the Russian president and Russia as a key player. So I think in that way, he's really managed to maneuver the political game in such a way that Russia has become an integral player in terms of what is happening in Syria. And if I look at the kind of discussions I've had with you and other channels over the past year or two, the questions have increasingly led more and more to people saying, is Russia a superpower? Is Russia more and more involved in the Middle East? Why is Russia? So there has certainly been this gradual growth that today, I think it's fair to say, most people would agree, Russia is very much part and parcel of what is happening in this part of the world.
Very much so, and I think the undertones of Cold War that critics will say that have also developed because of that narrative are something that we're looking at play here. But when it comes to ISIS and Russia in it, is Russia the player, in your mind, Dr. Birdie, to actually help move that or beat ISIS in that campaign above Syria at this point? Is it working?
Well, should we ask, is Russia's first interest really to go after ISIS, or its first interest is actually to target any rebel group that is supporting, but that is opposing Bashar al-Assad? So I think that's an important question to frame the debate. There's no question that Russia's maneuvered itself to be in the center of anything that happens in Syria, for good and for bad. I would say mostly for bad. When it comes to fighting ISIS, no exception. Russia is part of the coalition, and it's there. Is it a key? It depends how you define it. I mean, in the short terms, yes, Russia has been going after ISIS, but it's also been going after other rebel groups, and it's most importantly been going after civilians at a rate that it's incredibly upsetting, I would say. Is this part of a long-term solution to stabilize Syria? I'm very skeptical.
And when it comes to, yes. Sorry, I'm looking at you.
Well, if I can respond, I think it's unfair to say that Russia's going after the civilians or that Syria.
Amnesty International says it.
Yeah, but Russia denies it, and Amnesty International. No, but I mean, I'm sorry. You can have. The problem with the Amnesty International is that they don't have any independent verification on the ground. The United Nations themselves have said that they can't reach any conclusive conclusions, so that could be a separate debate. But I want to answer your question more directly in terms of, is Russia a key player in the fight against Islamic State? Even if you're right that the debate needs to be framed around what is Russia's primary goal in Syria, and I understand the criticisms that it's to step up Bashar al-Assad, but part and parcel of that is fighting Islamic State. So even if you agree with the critics out there that this is Russia's not primary goal, you can't deny the fact that Russia is managing to stabilize the situation inside Syria.
Okay. Go ahead.
The situation in Syria is far from stable. The number of civilian casualties has been going up since the Russian intervention started. The refugee flux has not changed. If you look at the number of internal displaced persons, it has not gone down. We cannot say that this is stability. By no means. Aleppo is especially embattled, and the conditions on the ground are worse and worse. I mean, cholera is coming back. This is not stability.
But it wasn't stability 4 years ago before the Russians came either.
No, it wasn't. But the situation on the ground, speaking to human rights organization, is worse and it's not improved.
The one thing I think that we can agree upon is that be it Putin or, Syria has become the main agenda, and Russia has put it on the center stage in that respect in many, many ways. Sure. Tal Shalev is agreeing with me fiercely. But I mean, that said, though, also when it comes to Putin, and there are Cold War tendencies, because he seems to be the leader to contend with, as also Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think, will agree with, right?
Well, yes. If we look at the number of times the Israeli Prime Minister has met the Russian leader and compare it to the number of times he's met the American leader in the past year, then it is clear where Israel is putting its cards, who is Israel gambling on. That also has to do with the fact that Netanyahu has a bad relationship with Obama, but it also had to do with the fact that the Russian presence here in the region fills an American void and comes after there has been a lot of pressure on the administration to step up the battle against ISIS, and B, it creates a big mess for Israel. It restricts Israel's aerial freedom in Syria and Lebanon, but it also creates a whole new range of interests that are clashing because working with Russia probably isn't the best thing that isn't exactly favored in the White House, and B, Russia is working with Iran and Assad, and these are Israel's arch enemies. So this does create a whole new situation for Israel. The only positive thing that might come out of it is that shutdown of the Turkish shutdown of the Russian plane, and the whole crisis between Turkey and Russia is considered to be one of the motivations for Turkey, for the Turkish rapprochement with Israel, which is on the table these days.
But back straight into Moscow, because also joined via Skype from Moscow by journalist Ivan Anichipur. Ivan, good morning to you. I want to thank you for joining us. We've picked, the morning edition of I-24 News picked Vladimir Putin as the man of the year. In Russia itself, in this, in the country, is he perceived as, I'll say it, the man who really made most of the changes or had that much influence, most of the influence on world events this year?
Well, in Russia, he's perceived as the man of the decade. Or the man of the last 15 years, and that is the problem, because there's no one else actually but Vladimir Putin. He has no rivals at all within Russia.
We in Israel know that line. He has no rivals very well. Okay, he has no rivals in the Russian administration.
He has no rivals in the Russian administration. He has no rivals among Russian politicians. Nobody is even close to him. It's and I'm not saying necessarily that it is a good thing. On the contrary, maybe in the absence of competition, policy sometimes is poor.
But still liked. There was, we have so little time, but I want us to go back to one little headline and the one last headline made by actually the one man that he is
It's one of the
Yeah.
best stories ever. It's the bromance between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, where Vladimir Putin recently called Donald Trump outstanding, talented, and bright. This, of course, came after Donald Trump said that he has no proof whatsoever that Putin is killing journalists in Russia, and they just started. I just think they should get a room.
Not to me, of course, not to make light of news anywhere, but we can all agree that I think it's Putin, Syria, and most likely, Putin and Syria, or Syria dominating next year, and he's one of the people behind that. Whether one of them, will be, whether he will manage to beat ISIS, time will tell. When we